Welcome back. In the last class, we were discussing about various securities issued by the company so as to raise capital, and we were discussing briefly about the concept of private placement. So, let us discuss some of the theoretical aspects relating to private placement. This was the area which we have discussed in the last class, private placement, and we have discussed the concept of private placement. It means issuing the security of the concern to a selected group of persons in private rather than offering the same through a public channel is known as private placement, and any company can follow private placement whether it is a private company or a public company. So in order to issue a private placement through a private placement, the company has to follow some of the procedures. So let us discuss the procedure for private placement of shares. The procedure for issue of shares via private placement is almost the same for both private companies as well as public companies. And we have mentioned that private companies can wholly issue their shares, whereas a public company can partly issue their securities or shares through a private placement concept. So what is the procedure for a private placement of shares? First one, provision in articles of association. We know the concept of articles of association. It contains the rules, regulations, and the procedures or steps that has to be taken as part of the working of the company is known as articles of association. And for a company, whether it is a public or a private, to issue shares through a private placement, that particular company should make sure that there is a provision in their articles of association of the company for the issue of shares through a private placement concept. So a provision must be made in their articles of association, otherwise known as AOA, and it is preferably to expand these abbreviations in the examination. Try to minimize the use of abbreviations. Next one, convening board of meeting. The company who wishes to issue their shares through private placement should conduct a board meeting, and it should be convened for the purpose of private placement of shares. Only then a company can issue shares through private placement. Once the board meeting has been conducted, next is issue of offer letter. For that, an offer letter may be drafted and approved by the board for the private placement of shares. And we know the term offer letter. Offer letter is otherwise known as private placement offer letter, commonly known as offer letter. So before the issue of shares through private placement, the company must draft an offer letter. Once an offer letter is drafted, a notice of extraordinary general meeting should be conducted. The notice shall be sent to shareholders for convening an extraordinary general meeting for the approval of private placement offer letter. So once an offer letter is drafted, in order to get the approval of that particular offer letter, a general meeting should be conducted. For that, necessary notice should be sent to the concerned shareholders to conduct the meetings, because in the meeting it has to be approved by everyone, then only the draft can be further proceeded. A special resolution shall be passed in the extraordinary general meeting, which we have discussed now. In that particular meeting, a resolution, not only the shareholders should agree with the concept, there must be a special resolution that should be passed in that particular extraordinary general meeting, which shall remain valid for a period of 12 months. Next one, filing of forms. There are a number of forms that has to be prepared and drafted as part of prior issue of shares through private placement. For filing of forms, requisite forms are to be filed with the registrar of the companies. We know who is known as the registrar of the company. You might have heard the term. and it should be done within 30 days of passing the special resolution. So once a special resolution is passed, it should be make sure to issue requisite forms within the 30 days of issuing your special resolution. Once all these activities is done, offer letter may be issued in PAS4 forms. PAS4 forms means prospectus and allotment of securities. It's a name of or the code of the form PAS4. So once the above activities are done, an offer letter may be issued in PAS4 within 30 days of record of names of the persons to whom the shares are going to issue. Once it is done, a complete record of private placement be prepared in PAS5. Earlier we mentioned that details regarding an offer letter should be issued in the form of PAS4 pattern. Once it is done, a complete record of all the persons relating with the issue of private placement should be made, especially to whom the shares are issued. That should be done in the form PAS5. PAS means prospectus and allotment of securities. So once the complete record of activity is done, next the company must give necessary instructions to the bank. So the instruction to be given to a specified bank, there will be a certain bank for the company. So instruction should be given to a specified bank for opening of separate bank account and depositing the money against allotted share. So those steps must be done once complete record of activity has been taken place. Once necessary instructions are given to the bank, next the company must confirm concern from allottees. That means the company must make sure whether the letters from all proposed allotment or to the allotment of shares, or otherwise known as allottees, proposed allottees giving consent to subscribe the issue are received or not. That is, the companies must make sure that the confirmation from the allottees means whoever is going to buy the shares through private placement, whether the confirmation letter has been received from those specified personnels or not. If not, the necessary steps should be made to collect the confirmation letter. Next one, file PAS forms. We have discussed about PAS5 and PAS4 during one of the procedure steps that we have discussed now. Offer PAS letter in case of offer letter and PAS5 in case of complete record. So once all these steps has been taken place or taken by the company should file the PAS forms. So the PAS4 and PAS5 are to be filed with the registrar of company with 30 days of issue of offer letter. So remember the dates with regard to the activities taking place in the private placement shares. Certain dates are there, it should be kept correct. So once the PAS forms are filed, next one, the company should make necessary arrangements for the allotment of shares. That is, shares are to be allotted within 60 days of receipt of money from the persons to whom rights are given. I hope you understand the concept. The amount should be collected within the 60 days. From which the shares are allotted. Next one, hold board meeting. That means the company must conduct the board meeting for the allotment of securities. So the allottees or the whoever to whom the private placement of shares is going to conduct, they might have made the subscription amount. So the shares should be allotted within 60 days of the receipt of money, and once it is done, the board meeting should be conducted with regard to how much shares has to be allotted to the allottees. Once the decision is taken, the intimation should be done to the respective allottees. That is, to intimate the investors about the outcome of the board meeting, that is, to whom certain shares are allotted, to whom shares are not allotted, like that. It should be intimated on time. Once it is done, file PAS3. PAS3 means Prospectus and Allotment of Securities Form 3 with Registrar of Company within 15 days of allotment. File PAS3 is filled or prepared once the necessary intimation has been done to the allottees regarding how much shares has been allotted to certain individuals. Sometimes it may not be allotted, likewise. That depends upon the situation. And finally, issue share certificate. That is, share certificate are to be issued, and minutes book and register of members are to be updated. So once all these steps are done, the private placement of shares is officially complete. Even though issue of shares through private placement is less costly and with few legal formalities, and it is another method that helps the company to raise huge capital quickly, but the thing is that the company must follow all these procedures in order to implement the private placement concept. So all these are the procedures. Still, the company must make sure that the following conditions are satisfied in order to implement private placement of shares. So let us discuss some of the important conditions. First one, number of subscribers. Subscribers means earlier we have mentioned about allottees or individuals to whom the private placement is going to conduct. So those persons is known as subscribers. So under private placement, an invitation to subscribe shares cannot be made to more than 200 people. Remember, number of individuals to whom the shares can be allotted is 200 people. No more than 200 cannot be entertained. No public announcement of such offers cannot be made, because as the name suggests, it is a private placement, not a public offering. So no announcement should be made, and it should be within 200 subscribers. Identify the persons to whom private placement offers have to be made. The company must make sure that all offers shall be made only to those persons whose name are recorded by the company prior to the invitation to subscribe. We can't accept an anonymous person or unknown person who wishes to buy the shares. The company must make sure that the names and complete details of the personnel should be recorded before the invitation of the subscription. Next one, money payable through check or DD. All money payable towards subscription of security shall be paid through check or a demand draft or through other banking channels. Make sure the company should not make the transactions by cash. All the transactions should be done either through check or through DD payments. No cash payment shall be entertained. Amount of subscription. The money received as subscription should be kept in a separate bank account by the company. That is, we have mentioned during the procedure that certain instruction should be given to the specified bank through which the amount may be collected or deposited likewise. So all the subscription amount or the further transaction should be done through the specified bank arranged for the purpose. Next one, approval. The price of the securities has to be justified, and it also requires a valuation report by a registered valuer. A company can't simply price their shares since it is issuing through a private placement. The price charged for each share should be valued by a registered valuer. Valuer means whoever value the value or price of the shares, in order to avoid overpricing or underpricing or any forms of cheating. So in order to make sure that whether the company is issuing their shares at a reasonable price, these shares should be valued by a registered valuer. Next one, approval of articles of association. You may think that during the theoretical part I am writing all the abbreviations, and I keep on telling that try to expand abbreviations. For the convenience of writing down in slides, I am using the abbreviations. For the examination point of view, it is better to expand all these abbreviations. So let's come back. Approval of articles of association. Articles of association must also prescribe about approval of the offer through special resolution. We have mentioned that because first and the foremost procedure that has to be followed for the issue of private placement is sufficient provisions should be made in the articles of association. The same point is also mentioned here in another form of heading, approval of articles of association. Next one, tenure within which allotment has to be carried out. Allotment has to be carried out within 60 days or the money has to be repaid from the 75th day. In the discussion of procedure for placement, we have mentioned some of the days connected with various steps, and I have mentioned that you should follow the days correctly. So with regard to allotment, make sure allotment has to be carried out within 60 days or the money has to be repaid from the 75th day. For example, the certain individuals might have paid the subscription amount, so the company must make sure to make the necessary allotment within 16 days, because if the company fails to inform within 50 days from the 75th day, the company has to repay all the subscription amounts. Next one, filing. That is, the company shall maintain complete record of private placement offers in the form of PAS5. We have mentioned that statement in the procedure, where complete record of these details or transaction must be made in PAS5. And finally, file return of allotment with registrar. That means a return of allotment of security shall be filed with registrar within 30 days of allotment and with the fees provided in the company's rule, along with a complete list of all security holders. So these are the conditions that has to be followed by a company in order to issue their shares through private placement. Apart from following these procedures, company must make sure these conditions are satisfied. So, do the company have to issue their shares through private placement? As we have mentioned earlier, it is having few legal formalities, and it is cost free, and it can raise companies can raise huge amount of capital quickly. Still, it has some procedures. So not some procedure, lot of procedures and some conditions also. So it is better to issue their shares to private placement. So let us discuss some of the advantages with regard to private placement. First one, low issue cost. We have mentioned that because private placement involves fewer legal formalities. We have mentioned that. So, and there is no need for printing and distribution of prospectus because it is a private placement, so no sort of announcement should be made. So no printing charges, no distribution of prospectus, no advertising, etc. Hence the cost involved with regard to issue of shares through private placement is minimal. So low cost issue. Next one, very few legal formalities. Because the private placement does not involve much legal formalities as in the case of issue through prospectus, because issuing through public offer where prospectus is there, brochures is there, issue of advertisement is there, but in case of private placement there are no such activities. So when the activities are reduced, the legal formalities also reduce. So in private placement there are only few legal formalities. That is why it is having a low cost activity. Next one, quick collection of funds. We have mentioned that through private placement, company can quickly collect the funds from the market. Even though the company can raise the capital only from 200 people, still it is one of the quickest way to raise the capital. Next one, suitable for small companies. Usually private placement is most suited to small companies as there is only fewer issue formalities. and no other cost issues or no legal issues are associated with private placement, it is better for the smaller companies and especially medium companies to follow this private placement concept. So these are the aspects with regard to the private placement. So now let us go to the next area. Issue of shares. So we are going to begin our main area under study, issue of shares. We all know the concept of issue of shares. It is a process in which the company is allowed new shares to the shareholders. The shareholders can either individually or corporates. The company follow the rules prescribed by the Companies Act of 2013. I believe you know the concept of issue of shares, and I hope you need not have to discuss any further with regard to issue of shares. Let us go to the remaining theoretical aspect with regard to issue of shares. Next one, means of issue. Means of issue means the how or what are the ways through which a company can issue their shares. There are mainly two ways through which a company can issue their shares. They are: first one, issue of shares for cash and issue of shares for consideration other than cash. During the previous discussions, we have mentioned about this issue of shares for cash and issue of shares for consideration other than cash. Issue of shares for cash means you can either buy the shares of the company by paying in the form of cash or bank payments or cash payments likewise. Issue of shares for consideration other than cash means sometimes the company may raise capital by issue of shares and the payment is made in the form of assets. For example, if I am issuing 1 lakh shares, costing 1 lakh shares of shares to the public, and a subscriber is willing to buy the 1 lakh rupees of shares, instead of paying cash, he is going to exchange it for a asset valuing rupees 1 lakh belongs to him. It may be your machinery valuing 1 lakh or a vehicle or valuing 1 lakh. So if the company is willing to get or buy that particular asset worth of rupees 1 lakh in order to issue the shares of the company, if the company agrees to it, it can do like that, or it can conduct that transactions. So that is known as issue of shares for consideration other than cash. So there are two situations. You can issue shares for cash, that is issuing shares and get money from the public, or you can issue shares to the public and get assets or anything of value of rupees, whatever the denomination of the shares. That is known as issue of cash and issue of shares for consideration other than cash. So issue of shares for cash. The companies can raise capital by issue of shares to the public. The amount thus collected from the public is share capital. We all know that concept. So let us discuss some of the methods through which the company raise capital. So we mentioned that the company raised capital by issue of shares for cash and issue of shares other than cash. Okay, we agree with that. That is the mode of payment with regard to means of issue. So means of issue, we have discussed about the mode of payment, that is buying the shares either through cash or through assets valuing the denomination of shares. In the points which we are going to discuss next is what are the methods through which the company can raise cash or capital. First one, initial public offering. That is the most commonly used method to raise capital from public. It is otherwise known as IPO or initial public offering. This is a method of issuing securities to the general public for the first time. That is one method, initial public offering. Offering the securities of shares of the company directly to the public. Another one is offer through prospectus. It is the most popular method of raising funds by public companies from primary markets. This involves inviting subscription from the public by issue of prospectus. Prospectus means brochures, or in simple terms we can say advertisement regarding the shares of the company. And a formal advertisement of issue of shares of the company is known as prospectus. It is just like a brochure of a hotel or a restaurant like that. It contains the complete details of the shares which the company is going to offer. That is known as prospectus. So this involves inviting subscription. Subscription means the public who is going to or willing to buy the shares of the company. So buying the shares is known as subscription. This involves inviting subscription from the public by issue of prospectus through advertisement in newspapers, in magazines, in dailies, in TVs or other medias. So a prospectus makes a direct appeal to the prospective investors so that the company can raise the capital. So what is the contents of this prospectus? We have mentioned that it is just like a brochure of a company or a brochure of a hotel like that. So the contents of the prospectus should be in accordance with the provisions of the Company Act and also as per the guidelines issued by the SEBI. So the company can raise capital through offers issued through prospectus. So there are two means. One is simply issuing it to the public and another is issuing through prospectus. Prospectus means just like a formal advertisement. Next one, offer for sale. In this method, securities are not issued directly to the public. In the former two methods, the shares are issued directly to the public, but in offer for sale, the securities are not issued directly to the public. Instead, securities are offered for sale through intermediaries like issue houses and stock brokers. You might have heard the term brokers. Stock brokers are there. They will act as an intermediary between the company that is going to issue shares and between the public also. The company at first sell the securities at an agreed price to the intermediaries. Intermediaries means issue houses or stock brokers. These intermediaries will resell the shares of the company to the investing public. So remember the flow, it is working. The company first of all sell their securities to the intermediaries. Then the intermediaries will sell their shares to the public. That is a concept in which the securities or shares are issued by the company to the public if the company is following offer for sale concept, issuing the shares through intermediaries or middlemen. That is known as offer for sale. And finally, private placement. Not only finally private placement, there are different methods through which the company can issue or share, raise cash or capital. And private placement, we have discussed in detail the concept of private placement. It is extremely cost-effective method for raising finance as compared to public issue. Companies which cannot afford a public issue can choose private placement because we all know the concept of private placement. We are not going to discuss any more regarding private placement because we have discussed all the concept with regard to private placement. Because of its merits of private placement, the company can follow private placement if they find it difficult to issue their shares to public issue, because in public issue the company has to make necessary advertisement, issue of shares through issue of prospectus like that. So there are many formalities and there are many steps. So it is a very costly and time consuming concept. The company who find it difficult to issue their shares through public issue can follow private placement concept. So these are some of the methods through which the company can issue the shares to the public. There are still some more methods which are with regard to issue of shares. We will discuss about the other methods or means through which the company has issued their shares to the public. Until then, go through all these theoretical aspects. We will discuss about the further theoretical aspects in the coming sessions. And remember, issue of shares, there are two ways. One is for cash and for consideration other than cash. With regard to issue of shares for cash, there are different methods or ways through which the company can raise capital. That is initial public offering, offer through prospectus, offer for sale, private placement, and there are two more. That is, one is right issue and another is electronic initial public offering. We will discuss about that. So remember the concept. Mainly two methods, that is through either for cash or either through consideration other than cash. So these are some other ways through which the company can issue shares for cash. So go through all these aspects. We will continue with the theoretical aspects in the coming sessions.